Yeah, I mean, Cornel West is better poised than anybody in several generations to expose the fraud of the Democratic Party. Sorry for the background noise. I can't control it. Um, yeah, I think Dr. West could do a lot to expose a great deal of the hypocrisy and the sham that passes for democracy in America, particularly its militarism and the reliance on racism of both of the major corporate political parties. Because he's running as a third party candidate, openly hostile to the Pentagon, openly hostile to Wall Street, openly hostile to the corporate duopoly that governs both parties, and because he is, frankly, the foremost sort of multidisciplinary intellectual in the United States at the moment, I do think that he's in a better position than anybody, I think, since perhaps Reverend Jesse Jackson. To expose it. Now, he and Jackson took very different tracks. Jesse Jackson obviously ran as a Democrat and did not run through the convention as Cornel West has already promised to do. But the depth of his insight, the imagery of his poetry, the power of his prose, he is unparalleled. He's a peerless visionary, and there are a great many people in this country who I think wish they had his insight. I think he stands alone in a category unto himself. And I think that, Biden and the Democrats are going to do everything they can to duck a debate. I expect him to be smeared in ways similar that I was. I expect him to be in a different position in terms of responding to it, because he's both in a different demographic place. And because I think that the reliance of Democrats, particularly on the Black vote, requires them effectively to engage him in a way that other candidates are not able to insist. And so, he's one of a kind, and I'm really eager to see him in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty amazing. It's interesting that he has been allowed to come on to corporate media. I mean, I don't really watch it, but I'll see clips from it that they have been having him on. I thought they were just going to pretend he didn't exist, actually.
And I expect that as the campaign season progresses, they will do everything they can to do exactly that. I mean, to the extent he's had opportunities to share his voice with the American public, it's very much in spite of the corporate media, in spite of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And there are cracks in the armor. The opportunities he's had to share his voice, I think, indicate that. And I hope to see them widen. I do think that the Democrats, Biden, all of the forces surrounding it, from Wall Street to the Pentagon to the national security industrial surveillance complex, I think there's going to be a lot of headwinds in his direction. And I think particularly about Operation Mockingbird here, a lot of Americans pretend that our media landscape has some degree of legitimacy, particularly based on the theory of the First Amendment, right? We have a theoretically free press. And so people think that means that what they get from news has some basis in fact. And we've seen, unfortunately, that the media in the United States is as state controlled as the media in any other country. And any number of instances prove the point, from the parroting of lies that led our nation to every single one of the wars in the last 3 generations were based on public lies reiterated by major media sources. People have seen a great deal of misinformation and active disinformation emerge in other contexts as well, from public health to Biden's family and its history of corruption. And I do think that to some extent the jig is up. More and more Americans, I think, are tuning out of corporate news, and they are seeking information through their own channels like yours, channels like other podcasters. I'm thinking about a particular one whose audience, from what I understand, dwarfs that of CNN. And to the extent we are living in an age of fractured information sources, we do, I think, have some basis for hope that he and his supporters, Cornel West, and those of us who favor a humane, peaceful policy paradigm, might find through the innumerable channels available to us, again, your show, any number of other voices like yours that are helping inform and educate and inspire an otherwise ignorant, complacent, and complicit public. I hope through those channels that he can break through. Ultimately, at the end of the day, media plays a very forceful role in elections, but at the end of the day, it's how many people reach out to how many of their friends on behalf of him and the vision that he represents that will turn whether or not we're going to be living in an age of continuing climate catastrophe and dystopia, or whether or not we might actually see a reformation of the United States that would place our nation's founding values the ones that at least we put on paper before the sordid continuing corruption that is driving humanity off a cliff.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Well, so I think there's a lot of value in him running, even if he doesn't win. Let's be honest. So he can change the narrative without getting 5% of the vote. I mean, as long as he's allowed to have any sort of footprint on the media, you can see the contrast between what he's going to be saying, and especially Biden, when Biden tacks right once the primaries are over, he's going to be even more centrist, and it's going to be clear to most people that we aren't represented by anybody.
Right.
And so he's going to be that person. And what's the effect of that? Do you push the Democratic Party left? You push what they say left, maybe.
Yeah.
But we need something beyond electoral politics ultimately to change things. And
well,
go ahead.
I agree on both of those fronts. I mean, I can relate to this very specifically. When I ran in 2020, I forced Pelosi to change her position on half a dozen issues. And as soon as I was neutralized, after my character assassination, she immediately flipped back and sold out labor. She sold out the racial justice movement. She sold out each of the movements that she theatrically accommodated in the face of a threat. And you're right to suppose and anticipate that Biden will do a similar thing, throw up a bunch of chaff, speak a bunch of hot air, make up a bunch of words that have no relationship to his actual policy commitments in order to mollify the people on whom he relies for support. And you're absolutely right that those theatrical commitments are entirely unreliable. And you're also right that we need something beyond electoral politics. I think that Cornel West embodies them both. One of the things I particularly appreciate about him is that he is a philosopher who speaks in poetry, and he literally embodies jazz, right? I mean, he is improvisational. He is poetic. He pulls from multiple different strands. Like, listening to him is like listening to music. And I think that because he is a different sort of voice, he's not a stuffed shirt. He, doesn't walk around in power suits. He hasn't spent a career in Washington. He spent a career among the people and translating the rarefied voice of the academy, or better yet, infiltrating the academy on behalf of people writ large. And I think that his voice, I hope, can inspire not only people to participate in electoral politics, but because of his theory of change and because of his running outside the corporate duopoly, I hope that he can help remind people what democracy means. And it is more than casting a vote every 4 years. It is very much about educating your neighbors, grassroots organizing. It is very much about challenging power at the point of intervention in our communities, in the media, in the electoral sphere, and in each of the potential creative ways that we each can. And his creativity combined with his intellect and his analysis, his critique and his policy prescriptions, I think that might, along with all of the things that it's going to beget and inspire, I hope will help us. Another way I'd put this is that he represents not just a political voice, but a constitutional one. Political voices are ones that contend for seats. They seek opportunities to make policy. Constitutional voices are ones that get at the root, the balance of power between government and people, the balance of power among the branches and between the federal, state, and local level. He is he is an open revolutionary. And to have a revolutionary contending for the presidency has a constitutional dimension that I don't think many people appreciate. We live in an era where most Americans are so ignorant of the Constitution. We just celebrated a national holiday, or at least a lot of people celebrated a national holiday geared around a set of principles that most Americans have no awareness of and no consciousness of. And, I'm thinking of this through the lens of the oath of office and the number of corporate politicians who swear an oath to a set of principles that they don't even understand enough to stand up for. And, he's someone who not only understands those principles, but he understands how they came to be. And not through the lens of the founding fathers, but through the very insightful perspective of Frederick Douglass. And I see Cornel West as almost like a contemporary embodiment of Frederick Douglass's voice and legacy. And there hasn't been, frankly, anybody like that in American politics, to be fair, ever. I mean, you might say Henry Wallace in 1944, to put Jesse Jackson in that position, when I compared them before, frankly, is very charitable to Reverend Jackson. I don't know if America has ever seen a voice like Cornel West's attempting to do what he's doing. And,
Right.
when you said before, Leila, you reflected on, the results of my campaign. I don't take the success or failures of voices in the public as a reflection of the temerity of those voices. Ultimately, San Francisco wasn't able to stand up for its own values when given the opportunity. And that's a failure of my former neighbors. And ultimately, I think Dr. West's candidacy is a test of America. Are we American or not? And I do fear that we have been so brainwashed by corporate propaganda over the last several generations that Americans have forgotten who they are, and they've forgotten what this country is supposed to represent. It went from being about democracy and human rights to being about consumption and militarism. And that's exactly the paradigm that he centrally challenges in no uncertain terms. And, ultimately, this is a test for we, the American people. Are we, in fact, the people that claimed freedom? Or are we the inheritors of that legacy? Or have we chosen to discard it? And we've done everything we can to discard it in the last several generations. And I think that the voice that he represents, the opportunity that he represents, is one that is up to us whether we're able to embrace it or not.